Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 25, Part 2. The logs were found in the main cabin, behind the canary's cage. Two of them, one kept by Trent, one by Goddedaal. Wicks looked first at one, then the other, and his lip stuck out. "Can you forge hand of write?" he asked. "No," said Carthew. "There's luck for you. No more can I," cried the captain. "Hullo! Here's worse yet. Here's this Goddedaal up to date. He must have filled it in before supper. See for yourself. Smoke observed. Captain Kirkup and 5 hands of the schooner Currency Lass. Ah, this is better," he added, turning to the other log. "The old man ain't written anything for a clear fortnight. We'll dispose of your log altogether, Mr. Goddedaal, and stick to the old man's. To mine, I mean, only I ain't going to write it up, for reasons of my own. You are. You're going to sit down right here and fill it in the way I tell you." "How to explain the loss of mine?" asked Carthew. "You never kept one," replied the captain. "Gross neglect of duty. You'll catch it." "And the change of writing?" resumed Carthew. "You began. Why do you stop, and why do I come in? And you'll have to sign anyway." "Oh, I've met with an accident and can't write," replied Wicks. "An accident?" repeated Carthew. "It don't sound natural. What kind of accident?" Wicks spread his hands face up on the table, and drove a knife through his palm. "That kind of accident," said he. "There's a way to draw to windward of most difficulties, if you've a head on your shoulders." He began to bind up his hand with a handkerchief, glancing the while over Goddedaal's log. "Hello," he said. "This'll never do for us. This is an impossible kind of yarn. Here, to begin with, is this Captain Trent trying some fancy course? Leastwise, he's 1,000 miles to the southward of the Great Circle. And here it seems he was close up with this island on the 6th, sails all these days, and is close up with it again by daylight on the 11th. "Goddedaal said they had the deuce's luck," said Carthew. "Well, it don't look like real life, that's all I can say," returned Wicks. "It's the way it was, though," argued Carthew. "So it is, and what the better are we for that, if it don't look so?" cried the captain, sounding unwonted depths of art criticism. "Here, try and see if you can't tie this bandage. I'm bleeding like a pig." As Carthew sought to adjust the handkerchief, his patient seemed sunk in a deep muse, his eye veiled, his mouth partly open. The job was yet scarce done when he sprang to his feet. "I have it!" he broke out, and ran on deck. "Here, boys," he cried, "we didn't come here on the 11th. We came in here on the evening of the 6th, and lay here ever since becalmed. As soon as you've done with these chests," he added, "you can turn to and roll out beef and water breakers. It'll look more ship-shape, like as if we were getting ready for the boat voyage." And he was back again in a moment, cooking the new log. Goddedaal's was then carefully destroyed, and a hunt began for the ship's papers. Of all the agonies of that breathless morning this was perhaps the most poignant. Here and there the two men searched, cursing, cannoning together, streaming with heat, freezing with terror. News was bawled down to them that the ship was indeed a man of war, that she was close up, that she was lowering a boat, and still they sought in vain. By what accident they missed the iron box with the money and accounts is hard to fancy, but they did, and the vital documents were found at last in the pocket of Trent's shore-going coat, where he had left them when last he came on board. Wicks smiled for the last time that morning. "None too soon," said he, "and now for it. Take these others for me. I'm afraid I'll get them mixed if I keep both." "What are they?" Carthew asked. "They're the Kirkup and Currency Lass papers," he replied. "Pray God we need 'em again." "Boat's inside the lagoon, sir," hailed down Mac, who sat by the skylight doing sentry while the others worked. "Time we were on deck, then, Mr. Goddedaal," said Wicks. As they turned to leave the cabin, the canary burst into piercing song. "My God!" cried Carthew with a gulp. "We can't leave that wretched bird to starve. It was poor Goddedaal's." "Bring the bally thing along," cried the captain, and they went on deck. An ugly brute of a modern man-of-war lay just without the reef, now quite inert, now giving a flap or two with her propeller. Near hand, and just within, a big white boat came skimming to the stroke of many oars, her ensign blowing at the stern. "One word more," said Wicks, after he had taken in the scene. "Mac, you've been in China ports. All right, then you can speak for yourself. The rest of you I kept on board all the time we were in Hong Kong, hoping you would desert. But you fooled me and stuck to the brig. That'll make your lying come easier." The boat was now close at hand. A boy in the stern sheets was the only officer, and a poor one plainly, for the men were talking as they pulled. "Thank God, they've only sent a kind of a middy," ejaculated Wicks. "Here you, Hardy, stand forward. I'll have no deckhands on my quarter-deck," he cried, and the reproof braced the whole crew like a cold douche. The boat came alongside with perfect neatness, and the boy officer stepped on board, where he was respectfully greeted by Wicks. "You the master of this ship?" he asked. "Yes, sir," said Wicks. "Trent is my name, and this is the Flying Scud of Hull." "You seem to have got into a mess," said the officer. "If you'll step aft with me here, I'll tell you all there is of it," said Wicks. "Why, man, you're shaking," cried the officer. "So would you, perhaps, if you had been in the same berth," returned Wicks, and he told the whole story of the rotten water, the long calm, the squall, the seamen drowned, glibly and hotly, talking, with his head in the lion's mouth, like one pleading in the dock. I heard the same tale from the same narrator in the saloon in San Francisco, and even then his bearing filled me with suspicion. But the officer was no observer. "Well, the captain is in no end of a hurry," said he, "but I was instructed to give you all the assistance in my power, and signal back for another boat if more hands were necessary. What can I do for you?" "Oh, we won't keep you no time," replied Wicks cheerily. "We're all ready, bless you, men's chests, chronometer, papers, and all." "Do you mean to leave her?" cried the officer. "She seems to me to lie nicely. Can't we get your ship off?" "So we could, and no mistake. But how we're going to keep her afloat's another question. Her bow's stove in," replied Wicks. The officer coloured to the eyes. He was incompetent, and knew he was, thought he was already detected, and feared to expose himself again. There was nothing further from his mind than that the captain should deceive him. If the captain was pleased, why, so was he. "All right," he said. "Tell your men to get their chests aboard." "Mr. Goddedaal, turn the hands to get the chests aboard," said Wicks. The 4 Currency Lasses had waited the while on tender hooks. This welcome news broke upon them like the sun at midnight, and Haddon burst into a storm of tears, sobbing aloud as he heaved upon the tackle. But the work went none the less briskly forward. Chests, men, and bundles were got over the side with alacrity. The boat was shoved off. It moved out of the long shadow of the Flying Scud, and its bows were pointed at the passage. So much then was accomplished. The sham wreck had passed muster. They were clear of her, they were safe away, and the water widened between them and her damning evidences. On the other hand, they were drawing nearer to the ship of war, which might very well prove to be their prison and a hangman's cart to bear them to the gallows, of which they had not yet learned either whence she came or whither she was bound, and the doubt weighed upon their heart like mountains. It was Wicks who did the talking. The sound was small in Carthew's ears, like the voices of men miles away, but the meaning of each word struck home to him like a bullet. "What did you say your ship was?" inquired Wicks. "Tempest, don't you know?" returned the officer. "Don't you know?" What could that mean? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps that the ships had met already. Wicks took his courage in both hands. "Where is she bound?" he asked. "Oh, we're just looking in at all these miserable islands here," said the officer. "Then we bear up for San Francisco." "Oh, yes, you're from China ways, like us?" pursued Wicks. "Hong Kong," said the officer, and spat over the side. Hong Kong! Then the game was up. As soon as they set foot on board, they would be seized. The wreck would be examined, the blood found, the lagoon perhaps dredged, and the bodies of the dead would reappear to testify. An impulse almost uncontrollable bade Carthew rise from the thwart, shriek out aloud, and leap overboard. It seemed so vain a thing to dissemble longer, to dally with the inevitable, to spin out some 100 seconds more of agonized suspense, with shame and death thus visibly approaching. But the indomitable Wicks persevered. His face was like a skull, his voice scarce recognizable. The dullest of men and officers, it seemed, must have remarked that telltale countenance and broken utterance. And still he persevered, bent upon certitude. "Nice place, Hong Kong?" he said. "I'm sure I don't know," said the officer. "Only a day and a half there. Called for orders and came straight on here. Never heard of such a beastly cruise." And he went on describing and lamenting the untoward fortunes of the Tempest. But Wicks and Carthew heeded him no longer. They lay back on the gunwale, breathing deep, sunk in a stupor of the body, the mind within still nimbly and agreeably at work, measuring the past danger, exulting in the present relief, numbering with ecstasy their ultimate chances of escape. For the voyage in the man-of-war they were now safe. Yet a few more days of peril, activity, and presence of mind in San Francisco, and the whole horrid tale was blotted out, and Wicks again became Kirkup, and Goddedaal became Carthew, men beyond all shot of possible suspicion, men who had never heard of the Flying Scud, who had never been in sight of Midway Reef. So they came alongside, under many craning heads of seamen and projecting mouths of guns. So they climbed on board, somnambulous, and looked blindly about them at the tall spars, the white decks, and the crowding ship's company, and heard men as from far away, and answered them at random. And then a hand fell softly on Carthew's shoulder. "Why, Norrie, old chappie, where have you dropped from? All the world's been looking for you. Don't you know you've come into your kingdom?" He turned, beheld the face of his old schoolmate Sebright, and fell unconscious at his feet. The doctor was attending him, a while later, in Lieutenant Sebright's cabin, when he came to himself. He opened his eyes, looked hard in the strange face, and spoke with a kind of solemn vigour. "Brown must go the same road," he said, "now or never." And then paused, and his reason coming to him with more clearness, spoke again. "What was I saying? Where am I? Who are you?" "I am the doctor of the Tempest," was the reply. "You are in Lieutenant Sebright's berth, and you may dismiss all concerns from your mind. Your troubles are over, Mr. Carthew." "Why do you call me that?" he asked. "Ah, I remember. Sebright knew me. Oh!" And he groaned and shook. "Send down Wicks to me. I must see Wicks at once!" he cried, and seized the doctor's wrist with unconscious violence. "All right," said the doctor. "Let's make a bargain. You swallow down this draught, and I'll go and fetch Wicks." And he gave the wretched man an opiate that laid him out within 10 minutes, and in all likelihood preserved his reason. It was the doctor's next business to attend to Mac, and he found occasion, while engaged upon his arm, to make the man repeat the names of the rescued crew. It was now the turn of the captain, and there is no doubt he was no longer the man that we have seen. Sudden relief, the sense of perfect safety, a square meal, and a good glass of grog had all combined to relax his vigilance and depress his energy. "When was this done?" asked the doctor, looking at the wound. "More than a week ago," replied Wicks, thinking singly of his log. "Hey?" cried the doctor, and he raised his hand and looked the captain in the eyes. "I don't remember exactly," faltered Wicks. And at this remarkable falsehood the suspicions of the doctor were at once quadrupled. "By the way, which of you is called Wick?" he asked easily. "What's that?" snapped the captain, falling white as paper. "Wicks," repeated the doctor. "Which of you is he?" "That's surely a plain question." Wicks stared upon his questioner in silence. "Which is Brown, then?" pursued the doctor. "What are you talking of? What do you mean by this?" cried Wicks, snatching his half-bandaged hand away, so that the blood sprinkled in the surgeon's face. He did not trouble to remove it. Looking straight at his victim, he pursued his questions. "Why must Brown go the same way?" he asked. Wicks fell trembling on a locker. "Carthew's told you," he cried. "No," replied the doctor, "he has not. But he and you between you have set me thinking, and I think there's something wrong." "Give me some grog," said Wicks. "I'd rather tell than have you find me out. I'm damned if it's half as bad as what any one would think." And with the help of a couple of strong grogs, the tragedy of the Flying Scud was told for the first time. It was a fortunate set of accidents that brought the story to the doctor. He understood and pitied the position of these wretched men, and came wholeheartedly to their assistance. He and Wicks and Carthew, so soon as he was recovered, held 100 councils, and prepared a policy for San Francisco. It was he who certified Goddedaal unfit to be moved, and smuggled Carthew ashore under cloud of night. It was he who kept Wicks' wound open that he might sign with his left hand. He who took all their Chile silver, and, in the course of the first day, got it converted for them into portable gold. He used his influence in the wardroom to keep the tongues of the young officers in order, so that Carthew's identification was kept out of the papers. And he rendered another service, yet more important. He had a friend in San Francisco, a millionaire. To this man he privately presented Carthew as a young gentleman come newly into a huge estate, but troubled with Jew debts, which he was trying to settle on the quiet. The millionaire came readily to help, and it was with his money that the wrecker gang was to be fought. What was his name, out of 1,000 guesses? It was Douglas Longhurst. As long as the currency lasses could all disappear under fresh names, it did not greatly matter if the brig were bought, or any small discrepancy should be discovered in the wrecking. The identification of one of their number had changed all that. The smallest scandal must now direct attention to the movements of Norris. It could be asked how he who had sailed in the schooner from Sydney had turned up so shortly after in a brig out of Hong Kong. And from one question to another, all his original shipmates were pretty sure to be involved. Hence arose naturally the idea of preventing danger, profiting by Carthew's new-found wealth, and buying the brig under an alias, and it was put in hand with equal energy and caution. Carthew took lodgings alone under a false name, picked up Bellairs at random, and commissioned him to buy the wreck. "What figure, if you please?" the lawyer asked. "I want it bought," replied Carthew. "I don't mind about the price." "Any price is no price," said Bellairs. "Put a name upon it." "Call it £10,000 then, if you like," said Carthew. In the meanwhile the captain had to walk the streets, appear in the consulate, be cross-examined by Lloyd's agent, be badgered about his lost accounts, sign papers with his left hand, and repeat his lies to every skipper in San Francisco, not knowing at what moment he might turn into the arms of some old friend who should hail him by the name of Wicks, or some new enemy who should be in a position to deny him that of Trent. And the latter incident did actually befall him, but was transformed by his stout countenance into an element of strength. It was in the consulate, of all untoward places, that he suddenly heard a big voice inquiring for Captain Trent. He turned with the customary sinking at his heart. "You ain't Captain Trent," said the stranger, falling back. "Why, what's all this? They tell me you're passing off as Captain Trent. Captain Jacob Trent, a man I knew since I was that high." "Oh, you're thinking of my uncle as had the bank in Cardiff," replied Wicks, with a desperate aplomb. "I declare I never knew he had a nevy," said the stranger. "Well, you see he has," said Wicks. "And how is the old man?" asked the other. "Fit as a fiddle," answered Wicks, and was opportunely summoned by the clerk. This alert was the only one until the morning of the sale, when he was once more alarmed by his interview with Jim; and it was with some anxiety that he attended the sale, knowing only that Carthew was to be represented, but neither who was to represent him, nor what were the instructions given. "I suppose Captain Wicks is a good life." "In spite of his personal appearance, and his own known uneasiness, I suppose he is secure from apoplexy, or it must have struck him then and there, as he looked on at the stages of that insane sale, and saw the old brig and her not very valuable cargo knocked down at last to a total stranger for £10,000. It had been agreed that he was to avoid Carthew, and above all Carthew's lodging, so that no connection might be traced between the crew and the pseudonymous purchaser; but the hour for caution was gone by, and he caught a tram and made all speed to Mission Street. Carthew met him in the door. Come away from here," said Carthew; and when they were clear of the house, "All's up," he added. "Oh, you've heard of the sale, then?" said Wicks. "The sale!" cried Carthew. "I declare I had forgotten it." And he told of the voice in the telephone, and the maddening question, "Why did you want to buy the Flying Scud?" This circumstance, coming on the back of the monstrous improbabilities of the sale, was enough to have shaken the reason of Immanuel Kant. The earth seemed banded together to defeat them. The stones and the boys on the street appeared to be in possession of their guilty secret. Flight was their one thought. The treasure of the currency lass they packed in waist belts, expressed their chests to an imaginary address in British Columbia, and left San Francisco the same afternoon, booked for Los Angeles. The next day they pursued their retreat by the Southern Pacific route, which Carthew followed on his way to England; but the other three branched off for Mexico. Chapter 25. Recording by Dion Gines, Salt Lake City, Utah.